While I was waiting for the spares to arrive to finish the amplifier section, I needed some capacitors, if you may recall. I decided to go ahead and get the cabinet ready for fitting the chassis in. And this is quite a job because you literally have to remove every single part of it from the cabinet itself, and then clean each part individually and then put it all back. It's painstakingly slow, but probably one of the most obviously gratifying parts of the job because you see the result afterwards and it's pretty amazing. As I mentioned before, the parts on this radio were actually in very good condition and it just needed quite a bit of cleaning. And the grill cloth, although it's been washed, still shows the position of the speakers through. In this lingo, we don't call it dirt, we call it patina. It just gives it that aged look, or maintains that aged look, which isn't a bad thing. The plastic trim is cleaned properly and it came out perfectly. The actual logo got polished because there was no brass showing through anymore. You'll notice in between the letters there's actually a little strip. That's a metal strip that holds the thing together, and it's painted brown, so that got touched up as well. Although the cabinet didn't get painted, the black trim on the underside was in pretty bad shape, so that got touched up all the way around. And while we had it, we gave it a new set of feet. The entire black trim around the back got redone, and it actually looks pretty neat. Gives it a very, very good look. The speakers, well, nothing wrong with them. They just got removed and cleaned. The actual middle speakers got removed together and not desoldered. Only the tweeters got cut out and new solder put on. Just makes it easy to remove them. They're in very, very good condition. They're in perfect condition. And they are indeed massive, so the sound from this thing is amazing. The removal of the speakers is a little bit tricky because they don't use screws to hold them down. They use those spring clips. And you have to be careful or you'll be looking for them all over the house. These speaker side grills were stuck in with glue that had gone black or brown. And they were actually sticking out, so they were removed, cleaned up, and put back. And then the woodwork itself retains its aged look, but it's been polished. And I won't even tell you how many times, but the gleam is back. This thing has a sort of piano finish, so it looks pretty good. And the whole result, the final result, is actually going to be beautiful. So here it is ready for the chassis, and that's what we're going to carry on with next. This is the result of the recapping of the power amplifier section. If you recall, I was waiting for some components. And as you can see, they've really mixed and mashed the whole thing together. Some of them are actually very good quality capacitors. This is a Wimmer 22 nanofarads. Very good quality, but obviously, you know, a bit how you doing. You know, these are all 10 nanofarads with the exception of that one. They usually, they're coupling caps. They should be the best quality you can get. And other than looking pretty awful, they were working, but I really don't know where these things came from. So the recapping has been done, and this is the result. All these have been changed. A couple at the top there, off the screen. And the amp has actually been checked again, just to make sure that I haven't made any cock-ups when soldering these in. You do have to do that. You do bits and pieces at a time. Check again that you have at least what you had before. If you don't, at least you know that it's something you've done now that's messed it up and you can go and correct it. But everything's working perfectly now. And the final part is the FM alignment. So we've got to get on to that. Just before going on to the FM stuff, I just want to show you the last bit that I did here. If you recall, this was the socket or the jack, the plug that is used for the external audio. So either pickup or in my case, I want to use a Bluetooth receiver. difficult to get, a bit messy, and also there's a risk that instead of putting it in that one, someone can easily plug into that one. So I decided to add a stereo jack. It's a 3.5mm jack socket over here. It's on a little board, a little PC board with a copper sticking out, so it'll age, look part of the set. Screwed into the top, these holes were there already, and then at the top they just the wires just go in and parallel to the inputs of that one. So that's done. And while we're on the topic of cleaning and polishing, here's the final piece. Faceplate's been cleaned, knobs polished, all the piano keys cleaned up and shined, and she's looking beautiful. And as you can see, the back plate shining through white or cream after painting it. The light bulbs are back in their place, as is the Magic Eye tube. So it's time to do the final bit, which is that FM alignment. We start off with the usual, which is a signal of 10.7 megahertz. The amplitude here at the moment is about 50 millivolts. Well, it is 50 millivolts RMS. We'll figure out if that's enough or not in a second. At the moment, I have the modulation set up, but I'm not using it yet. I can actually activate this modulation anytime I want to make sure I've got a signal coming through, because I should be able to hear that on the speaker. But for now, we're not going to adjust this to the amplitude or the quality of the actual sine wave. We're actually going to measure the AGC voltage. And we're going to measure that AGC voltage at that capacitor there. Now that capacitor is the discriminator cap inside that final IF transformer, which is in the can and has the EABC80 tube on there. And the way to get to that capacitor, which I had to open the can to replace, is by attaching the multimeter. I'm using the analog one in volts, DC volts, to pin 4 of the can. And I'm going to measure the voltage across the cap. So I'm going to connect the multimeter across the cap, which is from pin 4 to ground, any ground. And the negative voltage, the amplitude of the negative voltage on there will be an indication of the strength of the carrier coming through. And I need to optimize that to get that to the maximum. Now, where is that pin 4? Well, if we go down here, we see the underside of the FM of that final IF transformer can, and we have pin 4 sitting over there. So after finding where that is, which is over there, I've connected the positive of the multimeter to that. The negative is connected to a ground point, and I should be getting a negative voltage because I've switched on the carrier, and that's what I have at the moment. I have the multimeter on the 2.5 volt scale. It's reading approximately, well, 1.5. Yeah, 1.5. The other thing is I have the multimeter on negative DC because this is a negative voltage. So we're ready to start the alignment and see what happens to that voltage. Now, because there's been some pretty serious messing around inside the FM can, the first one I'm going to align, the first IF transformer I'm going to align is actually the one inside the can, which is over there. Over here, there's 111 and 112. So one on top, one underneath. I've lightly coupled that signal to the tube at the top, exactly the same way as I'd done before. So now we need to start adjusting and see what we get. The first one that we're going to tweak is actually the one on top, which is 111, and that's that one over there. And on the underside we have the corresponding one, which is 112. So let's look at the multimeter and see what happens. So starting at the top, it's going up and down. here's a peak. There's, whoops, this socket's actually very loose. Core is actually loose, so what I'm going to have to do is use an old trick, which is you take that, put in a little bit of string, and then that's after removing the core, and the one at the top is actually quite accessible, and then you screw it on top, and that should tighten it a little bit. So let's do that. Okay, I've put in that string, and it's a little bit tighter, not too tight because you don't want to strain. You don't want to put too much force on that core or you break it. So let's see what we've got now. There's my peak, and it stays. Now, you don't worry too much about the exact value here, because when I removed the core, I actually moved the coupling at the top, so relatively speaking it can change. As I touch the core, that can change quite a bit. Even my hand being close there can change, but I know that I've peaked that top one, and now I'm going to do the underside. No, wrong way. Oh boy. Okay, it's going to 2.5 volts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the strength of the signal to about 20 millivolts now, and we'll peak it. Oh, that looks peaked. Let me increase it a bit. There we go. There's our peak. I'll check the top one again. Right, I've got it in there now. One way and the other way. And that's the peak. Right, so we peaked that one. Done. So what we have now is that the optimum signal at 10.7 megahertz is going through this one here, goes through all the switching and goes into the mixer oscillator. It comes out of there through this IF transformer, and the two that I need to optimize here are cores 1 and 2 on the IF transformer 1. That is these two here. That then sends a signal to this IF amplifier. That'll come out there, and then I need to adjust to tune these two here. So again, 1 and 2 on the second IF transformer. That would then send the optimized signal to the second IF amplifier, and that will then go into the final one, which has the demodulation, discriminator and everything else. So at that point I need to optimize only this one here for maximum amplitude, and then that one there is that tricky one, and we have to do something else there. So what I'm going to do now is go to the other IF transformers. So we've done that one there. We're now going to do 1 and 2 here. So 1 underside, 2 on the top. That's the first IF can. Then we're going to do this one here, 1 and 2, 1 at the top, 1 at the bottom, 2 at the top. And then we're going to do this 201, which is the top one, and we leave 202 for the next stage. So the top one, it's going down. Oh, it's pretty much peaked. There we go. Now the under one. Yep, that's also peaked. While I'm here, I'm going to do the underside one of the other IF can. Doesn't really matter which order you do it in. And that's peaked. If you recall, I peaked it originally, so it's maintained it. Let's do the second one. And it's pretty much peaked as well. There we go. That seems to be it. Let's do the top core on that final IF transformer. And it's peaked. Okay. So as you can see, those last ones didn't need much tweaking, because when I was trying to find FM, I had actually peaked them using the signal going into the mixer oscillator. And obviously that's maintained, it's tuning. So the last thing we need to do is actually to tune the discriminator, the final core, which is the one on the underside, which, as you may recall, that's the one that gives you an optimum quality signal. It's basically something you need to do with a multimeter, 2 resistors, and you need to null out. But what I've done before is I've used a sine wave signal on the scope, and I've tuned it to the best sine wave. Effectively, I've tuned it visually. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do it properly, and I'll show you what we need to do. The description here is in German. Not sure I get it all, but what they basically tell you to do is to take 2 series resistors and connect them in series. And you connect that one side to 0.4, which is the one we've been using to measure the AGC voltage, and the other one to ground. And then you take a microammeter, a center 0 microammeter, and you connect that to 0.6, which is on that can as well, and the middle of those 2 resistors, and you null it out. Now, I've done this before. I've got 2 resistors in here. These are, I believe, 100K each, connected to crocodile clips. They're joined in the center, and there's a hook on the center. So this is that first stage. I put these 2 across from ground to that pin 4, and then I connect the one side of the microammeter to here, and the other side of the microammeter to 0.6. And then you adjust that core till you get 0 microamps. It'll go positive one way, negative the other way, and you stop it at 0. Now, I don't have a center 0 microammeter. I have a normal one, but I do have one that allows for negative DC. So if it's turning the wrong way, I can just flip the negative DC switch, and away we go. So here I have the multimeter set to 10 microamps, DC microamps. I have the connection, as mentioned, the one side is connected to the joining of those 2 resistors, and the other side is connected to that pin 6, and the 2 resistors are connected between ground and pin 4. So I'm measuring the current between pin 6 and that center point. And what I actually want is 0 microamps. At the moment, when I went in, this thing was pretty much at 0, but it moved slightly. And I'll show you what I need to do. You've got to try and imagine that this is on the center and it'll measure positive or negative microamps. What I can't do here is that, because I have no 0 center. I suppose I could. No, I don't want to mess with that. Anyway, what I do is when it goes below 0, I'll flick the switch and it'll become increasing the other way. In other words, you'll be measuring negative instead of positive, or positive instead of negative. So let's take it down. If I go to the right, it goes up and starts coming down. But if I go here, it goes up, 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 and now it's reversing. And it's getting near 0. And it's going down. So if I flick the switch, it's now negative, and it's going up, 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 up to about where it was before. So what I need to do is go back to the 0 point. There. There. That, give or take a bit of error of parallax, is pretty damn close. So that thing is now aligned. Let me just adjust it just a teeny bit. There we go, perfectly zeroed. And our FM is aligned. Now all we need to do is listen to it. So I'm going to take all this apart and get ready for a demonstration. There was one more adjustment I had to do after all. I'd forgotten about this one. This here is a trimmer capacitor, and this is what adjusts the RF alignment with the dial. In other words, it will determine what spread the oscillator works from. And the way I adjusted this, I noticed that if I tuned into a station and I moved this counterclockwise, I would then have to readjust the tuning lower down on the dial. And that's what I wanted to do, because there's a station I know quite well and it's quite strong here. It's at 88 megahertz, and I was getting that at something like 94. So what I did is I tuned to that station and I kept twiddling this till I got it down to 88, and it went down fine. Now the top end goes to 100 anyway. What I realized is I could actually go lower, which means I could pick up 101 or 101.6, which is the other station that's quite strong here. But if I did that, I would lose to the bottom end. So what I decided to do is to leave this original. It's tuning from 87.5 or so to 100.5 or so. So that's it for now. The rest is a question of putting it into the cabinet and ready to do the final testing.
Toledo, porque en esta ciudad se celebra la Virgen del Sagrario y los vecinos acuden al claustro de la catedral para beber de botijos de barro que se rellenan con agua de los pozos que hay bajo el templo. Es una tradición que se remonta al siglo XVII. Toledo, Andrés Lebrijos.
Todos los 15 de agosto podemos ver en el claustro de la catedral de Toledo a vecinos y turistas bebiendo de botijos de barro.
Es la primera vez que vengo a beber el agua del botijo y está buenísimo.
Muy especial, ¿no? El agua de nuestra Virgen. Eso...
Agua se obtiene de los pozos y cisternas que hay bajo el templo. ¿Por qué es justo hoy cuando se bebe de los botijos?
Es lo más escuchado en las últimas horas. Italia reclamaba que ese puente no era seguro. En ese lugar y en ese momento un español, Pedro Barte, que es en un túnel justo.
كما تعلموا ان في البوصله على الجماعه من الوحدات فالبندقيه الكبيره. En lugar de estar echando partidos con tus amigos, te pones a ensayar el...
A situação, o canalizador Luís Pindai está a frequentar o segundo ano do... O presidente da República, João Lourenço, deve cumprir com as promessas eleitorais, reclamou Paulo Fernando Antônio.
Les pâturages et provoqué des milliers de décès au sein du bétail. L'Organisation des Nations Unies pour la...
في خدمته في الرحمن في كل مكان سواء كانوا معتبرين أو كانوا حجاج.
Les vendeurs sont payés pour déclencher cet achat à impulsion. On en parle avec vous dans quelques instants.
De son côté, a questionné ce choix, celui d'être parti et de s'être occupé.
Tu la principale Angola où l'écrivain albino
Cette souffrance continue, cette
يد
La voce esta la voz de Turquía. Говори радио за Турция.
Negiteronun kırıcı komparatilendi. Satiyetin sonra keneme poti dermamini vakti.
Mkontani tu anaondoka na macho kaka nje ndo ananyeshia maua anataka.
Nandri.
Nandri.
Sambil abrakar öldürürken sahilen var.
Alguno de los periódicos españoles, suponemos que ya...
Lo que una persona que aprendió castellano.
المملكة العربية السعودية. إليكم الآن أحبتنا الكرام، هذه هي الحلقة من المصحف المرتل للشيخ خليفة بن مصبح الطب، وما يتيسر من سورة سبأ وحتى سورة الصفات. أعوذ
Autour du fait de parler de l'Afrique, en présentant les types de... Respectivement, parce que la réalité, certes, il y a
He's also picked it out with a lot of heart. And then in return, she gets something.
Il faut avoir suffisamment de recul, je pense, pour analyser ce débat-là qui était un débat.
Something from there. إلى ليفر إلى بلده الأم.
Guys aren't have that same expectations of us. Guys are a little more practical, and you can hold it against me.
1962 film to catch a rhino shows how 7 white rhinos were saved there by being caught and translocated to other parts.
Moreira de Cónegos, que também entrou no campeonato com um triunfo no Bonfim sobre o Desportivo das Aves. O angolano Lourenço, antigo avançado formado no Sporting, que também defendeu as cores do Vitória de Setúbal, não espera um jogo vistoso em Alvalade.
Here a bit of commentary is probably necessary. This is the FM. We're on 88 megahertz. That is the lowest station I have here, and it's got a very strong signal, as you can see with Magic Eye, which, by the way, has not been mentioned because it's been behaving itself very well since day dot. And I want to show you how the AFC, the automatic frequency control, works. You'll notice it's tuned in, and if I move it around, it stays pretty much tuned in till beyond 88.5. There it is again.
Depois de receber o Vitória, o Sporting vai à luz, frontal ao Benfica.
When I press the tuning knob, I'm actually shorting out those switches, and therefore the AFC, automatic frequency control, is deactivated. So I tune to the strongest position of the station, which is there, and when I release it, it latches on, and if I turn now without moving those switches, you'll notice that it stays on frequency for quite a while. Watch.
Esta quinta-feira é dia de decisões para o Braga. A equipa treinada por Abel Ferreira está em vantagem na pré-eliminatória com o Zória. Depois do empate a um golo na semana passada na Ucrânia, na divisão de jogo da segunda mão, o treinador anunciou que Diego...
It actually lost tuning on this dial at 88.5. So it stays tuned in to that same center frequency that I gave it originally for about half a megahertz either way. Now this could be a problem if you have stations very close together. But what you do is you tune to the one and it tries to hold it till you go a little bit further beyond and it finds something stronger, or it loses this AFC signal. So having looked at that, this is actually something that could be deactivated, but it's actually quite useful if you have any frequency drift when you're on a station. It adjusts automatically, and it can drift because of temperatures and so on, but this thing is fantastic. It stays on station. The other thing is there was a cap, 330 nanofarads between those two inputs to the FM CAN from the AFC that had not been put in or had been removed and not replaced. That was put in, and it made the AFC work perfectly. So let's go back to the beginning and do a demo without bullshit from me.
Mas acho que o segredo desta equipa é a união e que nunca vai desistir. Onde é o paraíso sem ti? Hay que ver mañana si somos novios o somos pana.
van, va a un barrio, va a una zona de serio, que lo llamamos nosotros por quitarle lo de la palabra negra.
Miserás, lo recuerda María Planas.
Era consciente de que se estaban produciendo cambios importantes.
So here we are at the end of another journey. This one has been quite an interesting restoration. It's been actually quite a pleasure and an honor to get this lady back to working order. It's quite a beast. It's big. It is incredibly good quality. It was not particularly difficult to restore this radio because everything was more or less intact, which makes quite a difference. And the result, the reception is excellent. The sound is as to be expected with those speakers, amazing. So this thing is going to be hanging around for quite a while, and I certainly hope to have the opportunity to do more like these again. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you like this sort of thing, please subscribe. Bye for now.